Welcome to the Personal Podcast, where we get to meet the real person behind the professional. I am absolutely delighted to welcome Alfie Joey today, now known as the Speak Easy guy, but I'm sure you will recognise his voice from BBC Newcastle. There's no small talk, so we'll try our very best to skip that. We'll try and avoid business questions and honest answers only, please, Joey. Alfie, sorry. Oh, my
Happens
goodness.
all the time.
Yeah,
Happens all the time.
And I won't ask anything where I wouldn't be happy if you wanted to flip it around and ask
Brilliant.
me. Sometimes it might not be relevant, but let's go. Right. Did you have a profound spiritual experience that led you to want to train as a priest?
I used to do a vocations talk. I used to be sent round as a seminarian to parishes and ask people to tell you that story. You know, they would get you to talk about your vocational experience. And I used to say I went to Lourdes, you know, where Our Lady appeared to the peasant girl Bernadette,
Right.
and miracles occurred. And I went to the grotto and I was looking up and there was no one there. And the statue's hands moved apart and beckoned me towards the statue. And I went, me? And the statue nodded. And then as I tried to move forward, it started, a sensation started pulling my leg, just like I'm pulling yours. And I used to say this to parishioners, and they would be devastated that I didn't have a spectacular moment or calling, or just from a strangely young age, I wanted to be a priest. And my family weren't religious. My dad was Catholic, didn't go to church. My mum wasn't Catholic. And yet, for some reason, you know, when you're a kid and the teacher says, draw in the book what you want to be when you grow up. And most people draw a doctor, a nurse, a cowboy or whatever. And I drew a priest. And that never went away. And I just kept wanting to do that. And so gradually it was accepted and off I went.
I mean, I am disappointed that there was no profound spiritual experience, and I was starting to buy
You
into
did
your
lean
story.
forward.
Yeah, I got all interested. I was thinking, this is gold dust for the podcast, and then to be let down like that, you know.
I didn't give it the big sell either.
But yeah, how strange though. I wonder if something must have got into your subconscious.
Well, I think, to be honest, Charlotte, I think I always wanted to be in show business, in performance, and that was never on the radar for a kid from a pit village in the northeast. That was dream on, mister. But I saw the priest at church and thought, hey, you've got a captive audience, got an outfit, all the lights are on him, he gets to do a turn. And also, yeah, it was more conceivable to train to be a priest where I was from than to be in show business or to do what I do now. However, I was always boringly nice as a kid. And I used to do paper round and I'd knock on the doors of the old people and wave at them and sometimes go and do the shopping and stuff like that. So I think it might have been, what can I do that is nice? And that seemed to be the only job. There weren't social workers where I was from. And I might have gone into that instead. But I thought, oh, well, the priest seems to be the nice guy who goes around and is nice to people and makes people a bit happier where I was from. And so that was the path I chose.
Oh, yeah, and that's so true when you think about it, especially the performance that the priest gives to an audience. So I can see your train of thought.
A lot of them are frustrated show business people, and a lot of them they're on a pedestal and there's ego attached to it, and they get a lot of adulation.
So there's some initial career advice. Yeah. Thinking of show business, go into the religious.
Go to the priesthood,
yeah, absolutely. And then you were a monk.
Yeah, so, well, I joined a religious order, so I was on the verge of being ordained a priest. And then at the very last minute, in the seminary I was at, there was a wing of brothers who were in this order called the Salesians of Don Bosco. And they always impressed me. They're always really nice. They also took a vow of poverty and lived a very simple life. And I loved what they did. They went and lived in communities where it was a bit poorer or tough and economically deprived. And they would help young people, do summer schemes, take them on holidays. And I went away a couple of summers and did work with them and thought, I love what they do, I'd like to join them. So that was it. I had to join. You do a novitiate, so you go away for a year, you take a vow of poverty, celibacy, obedience. And I lived in their monastery behind the walls for a full year, and then was professed a brother and was with them for... After doing 10 years of the other stuff, I then did 5 years with them.
Wow. And
long time, yeah.
What's a typical day like as a monk?
Well, there is a lot of sort of... it depends at what stage you're at, but there's a lot of sort of rhythm to it. You know, you'd get up very early and do an hour of or thereabouts of meditation, morning prayers, mass. So all that could take a couple of hours. And then you'd all sit down and have breakfast together, and then you'd all go off and do your different jobs. So one person might be a school chaplain, another person might run a youth club, another person might do another job. So that was it. And then you'd all come back later on in the day and have a chat about what you'd done and lived sort of a strangely apostolic life.
Yeah. Is there any part of you that misses those days?
When I left, I found it really hard. It cracked me up because, and again, this sort of stuff I don't usually talk about on podcasts, but that's what this is all about. So I really enjoyed that sort of gentle, quiet rhythm and the calmness of it all. And when I left, my first home outside the religious order was halls of residence at university,
right?
Which was loud and cacophonous, and everybody getting drunk and everybody setting fire alarms off, and it was just rooms bouncing with noise.
Yes, it's quite the opposite to a monastery, isn't it?
It was very different, very different. And I thought, what have I done? What's that? Very similar, I suppose, to leaving the army or leaving prison.
Yes.
Where you've just had this absolute fixed routine for many years and you got used to it. And then suddenly it's just you hear all these stories about people leaving the army, you know, just find it very, very difficult because they've had that very regimented lifestyle.
Yes, it's almost institutionalised, isn't it?
Yeah, completely. I was completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And are you still religious?
No.
No. Lost the faith?
Not at all. And I don't even see it as losing faith because it just sort of drifted away. I didn't have an epiphany of another kind where I just thought, well, all that was wrong or rubbish. I just sort of moved away from that lifestyle and got into my new comedy life and then BBC life and public speaking life. And it's just sort of, I look back at lots of the things I did. I think if I'm going to analyse it, I wouldn't say I like spending a lot of time thinking about, was there a God? Because I spent so much time, 15 years of my life's quite a long time. So I think if I really analysed and started digging deep and thought, there's no God, what have I done? Obviously, I didn't waste the time because it was part of my life. I went into hospitals, prisons. I was a chaplain in schools and prisons. And so I had all these fascinating experiences. But I just think the amount of time I spent in prayer, in the monastery, benediction, all these different ceremonies, you think, what's an epic waste of time if you think of it like that. So I think if I did analyse it, I think I would probably come to the conclusion that it was probably all odd.
Yeah, I wouldn't see it as a waste of time because also you would have been working on yourself and your personality.
Absolutely.
And what's got you to here today.
Well, it was brilliant in those terms because we did the Myers-Briggs course, we did a counselling course, we did so many things that I would say improved me as a human being that I probably wouldn't have done if I'd just gone into a job, say, straight out of university at 18. So there were so many people skills, chaplaincy skills, prisons, hospitals, all these different ways of life with a role. It was a privilege, you know.
Definitely.
So I look back and think there was a lot of use to it, but just those huge chunks of the day where you're sort of in deep contemplation, I just wonder whether I would look back and think that's a long time to think about something that maybe isn't real.
But at least you've thought about it.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to go there. I'm going to ask you, so what do you think? You know, is there a God?
Well, because I was coming here today, I've thought about it more than I normally would. And I just think it's too much to think that I do think something is bigger than everything. Something must have started everything off. If there was a big bang, there was something that lit the fuse.
Yes.
But I can't think that would be some one or thing, he or she, who decided to put us on this tiny little speck in a universe with a designed plan for us to be good or bad or have a particular way, because I just think we're a speck in a solar system. And I find that would this thing have set this little ball rolling and thought, right, all of this is rolling, and it's much bigger and beyond this as well. But that little speck is the most important bit, and only one of the religions will be right, and all the rest will be fighting, and I'll just sit here and watch. I don't think a benevolent benefactor or creator would do that.
Yeah, I can see your thinking.
So I think if I did deeply analyse it, I would think that, you know, it's a scientific explanation that would probably answer everything. But I do find it fascinating that there's so much I can't explain spiritually. And I saw deep things happen spiritually for people, and I saw people affected by prayer or ghosts or other things that I just think there's something I can't explain. And I think probably the answers to a lot of that might come from inside, might be self-created, but I did see things that I just can't explain.
Can we dig a little bit into that? Like what?
Well, I did a placement with a priest who was the diocesan exorcist.
Right.
And he used to be called out
Wow.
to get rid of spirits and things. There would be things jumping about mantelpieces, you know, flying off ornaments and stuff like that, or pictures spinning around. These things.
Did you see some of that happening?
Well, so this priest went round to a house where they were obsessed with Elvis, and they had. It's already funny. So they had a spiritualist round to talk to Elvis. Elvis was in the building. And they couldn't. This is not a comedy routine. This is truth. They couldn't get rid of him, and all these pictures and statues were jumping about. So they called the priest, and he went round. And he said, "Get rid of all this stuff. You're giving it strength. This is idolatry." So they got rid of all the stuff, and it stopped. So I can't explain that. The one thing that I witnessed, I got a call. I was in a parish in Liverpool, and I got a knock on the door, 11 o'clock at night. All the priests were out. I was the brother. And so I answered the door, and this Scouse woman said, "There, my son's possessed. Can you come round, Father?"
I'm laughing at the impression It's brilliant.
So I went round, and I knew the family because the kids were in the school I was in. And this kid was making all these babbling sounds, and I can't explain that. And I can do impressions. And I've heard people speaking in tongues at prayer meetings.
Right.
And I can do good voices, a range of voices, but I can't do those noises. So there's something possesses, whether it's self-induced but it's almost like someone commentating on the Grand National in Russian or something. I can't
just
make that sound.
Just coming out of this young boy's...
Pouring it, and I've seen that in prayer meetings as well, by people who are clearly not making it up. Something's happened. And I've been at healing services where people put their hands on people, collapse, and then they crash to the ground so viciously that. But then again, I've seen hypnotism do similar stuff.
Yeah.
So I can't explain any of this, but I'm more inclined to think, you know, for instance, the Shroud of Turin cured a lot of people, or a lot of people felt healed or changed or transformed once they'd seen that, and then it was deemed a fraud. So it did that. I think the human being is incredibly powerful and can maybe cure things themselves without knowing. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about how you can use your mind to cure things and that mindset, and also how you can use your mind to create the problems as well.
Absolutely,
And we all know how, you know, mental health, if you're having negative symptoms of that, it affects your whole body. So it's clear, even just when you're nervous, you know, the physical symptoms you experience. So I do think there's a close link. But I do, you know, if we're talking like some of the Bible stories, I'm not a religious person, but I do believe in kind of the healing element, because that happens happens kind of
Yeah.
today almost.
It happens. I just don't know how.
Yeah,
I just don't know.
I don't know
Yeah,
how.
yeah.
And I think that's the problem. We don't know how to explain it scientifically. Therefore, it doesn't really count in terms of the overall kind of rules of life. But it's interesting. I think more and more people are becoming open to it.
Well, wellness, meditation, it's all part of everything I go to now has a section on wellness, neurodiversity, how to, be better with these things and how to deal with these things. And that's all good, isn't it?
Absolutely. If it's making us feel better and improving us culturally as well, I think it's really important. So on kind of that God topic, what do you believe happens when we die?
Well, now, nothing.
Oh.
Sadly, I think again, it's that speck of dust in this vast thing. I don't know how. I just don't think we're that important in the whole scheme of it all. So I'm just not sure about. And I know lots of people talk about regression, and I was once a Roman centurion, but I'm going to come back as a horse. There are two. If you analyse that, to me, there's just too many complications. So if I was the Roman centurion, what was it before that, and why the Roman centurion? So I'm just not sure.
I've got really no evidence, but for some reason I just believe in that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know why, and I can't explain it.
I've heard you say on the podcast before, and you've had dreams and
it's
suggested
crazy.
certain stuff. No, it's
But
normal for you.
Yeah, I guess. I do think in the loosest or the most crudest terms, it's just transference of energy. Say we're buried, our energy transfers into trees, almost that grow out of the soil that our decomposing flesh is in, which is a pleasant thought, isn't it? But then you went on to kind of quite a loud career relatively to that. Do you ever miss the kind of stillness and solitude?
I do, because I draw a lot now as one of my jobs. That's my relaxation. That's my meditation. So that's my new meditation. So when you're drawing pictures, it's very difficult to stress or labour on something that you're worried about. Although I've just finished a children's book where I had to draw nearly 100 pictures in a couple of months, and that was stressful, but that was for someone else. And it's produced a lovely book at the end of it. But generally, when I'm drawn, that's my solitude, that's my peace. And I used to get up an hour before I went on the radio and do an hour of drawing. I'd put a camera on and just do stuff. And the amount of people who find that relaxing watching that as well. So people like watching other people draw as well. So
definitely, I do. And I find it really relaxing to do mindful colouring in, where it's a really small, intricate design.
Another industry that's not an accident. Yeah. It's provided relaxation for loads of people,
Absolutely, And so you were in the monastery and then you suddenly had a change of heart. Was there anything that prompted you to leave?
Yes. And I'll tell these quite quickly because I've said this on other podcasts. There were two things really. So I was in London doing a degree whilst I was in the monastery, and I decided I did a module in stand-up comedy, and that was huge. That was a massive. When I did that, I felt something. I did feel something. Otherworldly. I just felt, this is what I've always wanted to do. This is powerful. And I loved it. I'd never had a feeling like doing stand-up the first time. It was electric. And I floated home. And when I started the degree course, I never told the other students I was in a monastery because I thought they'll just think he's weird. We won't talk to him. So I never let on for quite a while. But then I got really pally with them. And we were studying in North London. The monastery was in Battersea in South London. So they'd all be going to it was the old Bull and Bush just over the road from the university in Golders Green. They'd all go there for a drink. Hey, come on. Yeah, but I've got to get the last tube. Oh, cause stay out. Because I was one of them, But eventually the questions were getting more, why aren't you staying? Why aren't you doing, you're one of us? And I kept making excuses and I thought, I've got to tell them at some stage. And then one of the lecturers said, right, today's session, we're all going to say something about ourselves that nobody knows. And everybody went round and said, I once won a top trumps competition or whatever. And it got to me and I went, I'm a monk in a monastery. And they all went, whoa. And they all came on and hugged me. It was really nice. But the nice thing was they all kept swearing and didn't, they weren't, I was one of them by that stage.
Yeah,
so
they
it
didn't respect
matter.
you anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Didn't care. So that was nice. And that was me easing into the real world almost. And then that comedy thing was a big part of it. And then at the same time, I'll tell this very quickly, but I'd been school chaplain in Liverpool, and one of my best friends, Stuart, was the drama teacher, asked me to be his best man. And his uncle was the fella who wrote all the scripts for Morecambe and Wise.
Wow.
Eddie Braben, who, if you watch any episode of Morecambe and Wise, it's written by Eddie Braben. He wrote it all. So they've dramatised his story.
That's
because
incredible.
It's unbelievable that he wrote all of those Christmas specials on his own. On his own,
it.
yeah.
Yes.
Every joke you can think of. He'll never sell ice creams going at that speed. Eddie Braben. He wrote every joke they did. So Eddie Braben was going to be at the wedding, and Stu said, Uncle Eddie never laughs at anything. Don't let that put you off. And I went, I am going to make him laugh if it kills me. So I did the whole speech for Eddie Braben, not for Stu and Jane. Well, I did. But I did hats, wigs, impressions, the whole lot. And I thought, I've got to make him laugh because he is, Morecambe and Wise, when I was a kid, were the best, Did
he laugh? So
he led a standing ovation. He sent me photographs, and he came over to me and he said, what do you do, son? Another Scouser. And I said, I'm a monk in a religious order. And he said, forget that, show business. And that was, I went, wow, that's from Eddie Braben. So that gave me
what a confidence boost.
real, and then that was it. The ball was rolling then, and I went to Father John, who was, I think, the rector at the time of the, and I said, I love comedy a lot. And he said, you've made your mind up, haven't you? And he was great. Maybe they wanted me out. He was really supportive. And when I left, they were still supportive, and they come to see me at shows, and they would. I used to go back for my dinner there and stuff. So I had a really nice exit, sort of staggered exit almost. They were great.
That's incredible. And it must feel so good being able to make people laugh.
Oh, it's the best. It's. I think of all the performance pursuits, whether it's music, theatre, singing, you always get a round of applause at the end, but that's not the metric in comedy. It's how much people laugh during. Okay. And so if that doesn't work, you've failed.
Yes.
And that's what makes it harder, I think. And that's what makes it, I think it's the bottom rung of the entertainment ladder. You wouldn't say to someone doing striptease, get off. But you would to a comedian.
That's true.
And it happens. It happens, and it happened to me. And I've died deaths on stage, and it's excruciating. And that's what makes it, because there's no feeling like a comedy death. In the same way I said it's brilliant when it goes well.
Oh, yeah.
If it goes horrible, it's like, your mouth goes sticky and everybody hates you. And then you've got to leave the building and walk through the audience, and it's excruciating. You're squirming now.
Yeah, I can remember a performance I watched where it was terrible, and I just felt so bad for them, and so God knows how they felt.
Well, that's it. The audience can't fake it to help you. They can a little bit, but not all of it.
No.
And eventually, thankfully, that hardly ever happens. Especially now when you've been doing it for a long time, most of the tricks, so you become a professional. So
yes, absolutely.
you become better, but. There's always a death round the corner. When you think you've conquered it, there's always a dodgy one.
I guess it's that complacency, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's great to build that confidence, but it's like getting too confident.
Exactly. Yeah.
But a lot of people would consider that one of the most challenging things they'd ever have to do, to go on stage alone, public speak, but then public speak and make people laugh.
Oh, it is. I think it's definitely, but it's a skill, and you can learn it. And Eddie Izzard, Jimmy Carr, they all did courses. So it can be studied, and you can tinker with it and tailor with your set. And
I guess like anything, there's a certain degree of natural talent, but then also it is the training, putting the work in to perfect your craft. But what's the most challenging thing you've done?
I suppose comedy, as we've just explained, is the hardest. If you mean career-wise, if you mean
any,
I suppose. Leaving the order was probably the hardest thing I've had to do,
Just adapting, as you mentioned before, to the new way of life.
I suppose all the way through, I've made decisions where I've had to I'm going to do something different now, any change is tough, but it's nearly always worth it if you get it right, and if you think, I've got to change this because this is not quite right. It usually is the right decision to move or to change and not get stuck. And I've talked about this at TEDx and stuff.
Yes.
And you know, you can get stuck in a rut, and that's probably the time to move on. I've done that, and it is always hard. It's not easy.
Yes.
But it's usually worth it.
Yeah, I think some people think that, you know, if you're moving on to something that's you deem better, it should come naturally. But no, change is always really hard and uncomfortable.
There's risk involved. That you've got to bridge the gap, and you've got to put so much work in.
Definitely.
And that's the bit that people usually discount.
Yes,
but it's
the hard work.
It's always the work, yeah.
Yes, and I did listen to that TEDx talk that you did as well, and it was all about why people settle for the ordinary, however that ordinary looks for them. Why do you think so many people do when they have that talent within them to push themselves to higher things?
I think it is security. I think usually people just think, well, I'm okay here, and okay is good enough. Whereas you could have something that's brilliant or exciting, and why not give that a chance if it could be a lot better? I used to see people at the BBC who really didn't like it there. Now, I thought it was a pretty cushy number working in journalism, because what do? You tell stories in an interesting way. That's pretty much it when you narrow it down. You're not sweeping streets, you're not digging holes, you're not working outside much. So it's a pretty cushy number, I would say, generally. But there were some people there who were just walking around the office, just waiting for a pension, not happy. And I would think, don't wait for your pension. Because one person said, forget about, I think it was, forget about the tension, think about the pension. And I'm thinking, wow, I'm sorry that you're tense for a start, but hanging around for a pension is a dangerous thing, because A, you might not get there. You might die first.
Yes, that's always a cheery thought.
And B, you might get to your pension and think, I've just spent 10 or 15 years doing something I didn't want to do, and that is a huge amount of time. Trudging through treacle every day just to get some nice holidays when you're in your 60s or 70s.
Absolutely. Life's so short for that.
Yeah, I've got a good pal who's doing it right now, and he's brilliant at so many things, and I talk to him all the time. He's been my biggest champion. He encourages me, but can I get him to take that jump, that leap? I can't. You can, some people daren't and just stay, and I'd say loads of people stay and just play it safe. And
I know a few people as well, and you know, you definitely haven't done that, which is brilliant. You've always set these goals and had these dreams, and then you've reached and you've worked hard to achieve them. Are there any dreams that you haven't achieved yet? Sorry to interrupt, but just a quick word about our sponsor, Be Daily. I've been subscribing to the Be Daily now since starting my business. It provides relevant and informative information directly to my inbox, not just about the North East, but also national news. If you're interested in subscribing, we'll put the link in the description box so you can get the business news directly to your inbox. Now back to the podcast.
I'm always dreaming. I'm always thinking, oh, I could do that. I could try and do that. I would love that to happen. And they sometimes shift and they sometimes change. When I started out in comedy, one thing I thought would be great, the Royal Variety performance. And now I don't even watch the Royal Variety. I don't think it's very good now. You know, it's just funny how something that, or when I did some acting, I was in sitcoms and stuff like that. You think, oh, I wonder if I got a really good part. Would I ever end up in a film that's won it? And now I don't enjoy that process as much. I did it a couple of times and I found it very long-winded and very slow process. So it didn't appeal to me as much as the immediate stuff I did on radio or on stages or interviewing people at business conferences. Much more thrilling for me.
And do you think there's any secret to achieving your dreams?
People talk about success sometimes as if it's an amount of money or it's the kind of house or car you've got. And I try not to separate success with significance. So I think real success for me is where you've been significant for those around you or something you leave behind or for those you give it to. So, for instance, if it's a good TED talk, I've had people come up to me and say, I couldn't believe it. You've changed my life. I left my job because of your TED talk.
Amazing.
I couldn't believe that.
That's lovely to hear.
Unbelievable. I didn't think that when I set out to do it. But that to me equals a little bit of success. When I've drawn a children's book, if a teacher says that kids loved it, that's success. Or if, I give a talk, or if on the radio, it happened all the time. You never knew what difference you were making, especially during COVID, what difference you were making to people's lives.
Yes.
And people said, you were my company, you helped me with my job, you were helping people in ways you didn't know. So that to me is success.
Absolutely. And do you think there's such a thing as a lucky break, or do you think the harder you work, the luckier you get?
Well, sort of both. I think it is a case of making your own luck, and if luck comes along, knowing what to do with it. I do think there are people who are, because of one thing that really frustrates me is social mobility or lack of social mobility. I come from a council house in a pit village where there wasn't a huge amount of opportunity, and I do think I followed some lucky breaks along the way, but I always sort of utilised them or moved on from them or worked really hard to get the best out of them. But lots of people, I think, don't get opportunities. And it's too easy to say, well, if everybody works hard, it's okay. But I think to me, I think sometimes poverty is the forgotten diversity. Everybody sort of, which is great, insists on diversity in the workplace and diversity in the media, but I think sometimes the forgotten one are people who don't have much money.
I think you're absolutely right on that, actually. It doesn't seem like it's trendy to talk about poverty.
No. And I think if you watch, say, for instance, CBeebies or...
I do.
And I do, and I used to watch it all the time. You'll see a lot of... it's brilliant with Mr. Tumble is fantastic, with people with special educational needs, with people with disabilities, with ethnic minorities, but I don't see a great deal of poorer kids. I don't hear those kind of accents, and I'm from those places and I've worked in those places, and I think that is missing in the media and in the workplace.
Yeah, I agree. And it's often said as well, when people hear poverty, they tend to think, lack of money. But sometimes it is really that poverty of aspiration.
Yeah,
and
100%.
Seeing what is possible. How do you think we solve that problem?
Well, if I think if the powers that be recognise that as being a problem as much as all of the other things that they've started to solve or address, then I hope it can be solved. But I suppose mention it on places like this as a start.
Absolutely.
But I think, I saw someone from a great charity, Gateshead Citizens of Ice, talking about on LinkedIn today, and I left a comment agreeing with it and get involved if you can.
Yeah, opening conversations about it, definitely. And also people like yourself.
I do it in schools. I try and tell kids that it is possible to follow your dreams, and it is possible to do what you can do. And I always say, if I can do it, anyone can do it. I believe that, but sometimes you need someone to tell you that.
You do.
Or make it possible.
Absolutely. I'm really lucky that my parents always told me that. But if you've never been told it, then you just don't realise.
Absolutely, yeah.
And also, people like yourself proudly speaking about your background. But some people can be ashamed.
Yes.
And that's, if we don't talk about it, I was from here and now I'm here.
Yeah.
And this is how I got there.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And my mum and dad were great. I've made lots of weird decisions to them, and they never questioned any of them. They looked a bit worried at times, but they never said, "Who do you think you are?" or "What are you doing? Are you mad?" They just went, "Keep going, just keep going, keep doing what you're doing." It's brilliant.
That's beautiful, and that was one of my next questions. Actually, did they instill any important values in you growing up?
That would be the number one value. They never judged anything I did that was a bit odd and quirky, and I'm trying to be the same with my children now. The odder or the quirkier, go for it. Keep being you. keep being original, don't conform, don't blend in, do what you do and you'll stand out. And I had their blessing all the way, even though it was, my dad didn't understand me going to train to be a priest. He found it weird. And then going into comedy, it just was, all these things were very insecure professions and very fragile. And it was always, are you sure? Well, then you've got our back, and I was never pressured to do anything.
Oh, I love that advice. And quite often, even on this podcast, a lot of people's hang-ups in life have come from that early advice from parents, or telling you can't do this. No, you definitely can't do that. That's not what you do. That's not how you behave if you're X or if you're Y. So I heard a quote a long time ago, and you probably know it already, but it's almost like how you speak to your children becomes their inner voice.
Oh, I've not heard that. That's good.
Yeah, it's something I'm very conscious of now, having children. You know, I'll say something and I'll be like, oh, actually, no, reprogram. Because, you know, sometimes when you're stressed, you say things or you snap and get a little bit grumpy. But, I have to always correct myself and be like, no.
I try and be really positive, and they're in a very positive school. It's called Gateshead XP. There's only 2 in the country. There's one in Doncaster and one in Gateshead. And it's still a state school, but it's got this American Silicon Valley vision of positivity. They're all in crew, and they work for each other, and they're not taught in the traditional way, and I love it. I love it, and it's great.
Cool. I never even knew about this type of school.
It's new in Gateshead, so my son's year was the first intake, so it's really exciting. I love it.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm actually reading a book at the minute about explaining the difference of kind of cultures, and it says that as British people, we're often kind of, our mindset is to expect the worst, but the American culture is expect the best.
Yeah. Absolutely, every kid's born to think they can be president, apparently, in America, and that's
which is
certainly not the case here.
It's not the case here, and it's probably again too extreme for what we're talking about in terms of opportunity. And then the Australian culture is more like reality, you know. You can
somewhere in the middle.
Yes, exactly. But I just thought it was interesting and so correct about the British culture sometimes, but that we need to change, particularly in these deprived areas. But yes, change the subject. So you're not regularly on the radio anymore. No. How are you feeling about that?
Well, great, to be honest. I loved it. Best job, I think I could have had. I used to do cassette versions of me being on the radio when I was a kid. So it was another thing I wanted to do. But
before becoming a priest?
When
training
I was
as a priest?
7 or 8. I've still got a recording of me doing, hello, welcome to my radio show. So I really wanted to do it. And again, thought, well, that'll never happen to anyone like me. And it happened. And I loved it. And it was brilliant. But the time was right. And I decided to move on myself. And they were really nice. They was very friendly and gave me an incredible send-off. But pretty much as soon as I finished, I read a book by Sarah Pittendrigg, who you've had on the podcast. Great episode.
Yeah.
And Sarah's book, The I Can Method.
Yes, I've read it.
I read it in pretty much one sitting.
Me too.
And I stopped and I went, I've not read a book in 12 or 13 years like that. And I'd always blame my kids. So I was always thinking, well, I've got no mental bandwidth. I've got no space in my brain to read. It's your fault. I'm so busy and consumed by it. And then I realised it wasn't the kids at all. It was the radio. So what would happen is we'd finish the show at 10 o'clock and we'd get in there at 5 o'clock in the morning. And you're already, it's such an intense thing doing a breakfast radio show.
This is intense, and this is totally different. This is just an hour,
and that was all speech, and you'd have different subjects every day and different guests. You might have Keir Starmer on for half an hour, so you'd have to prepare for that and what we're going to ask him, but that wouldn't be the end of it. Then you'd be talking about breastfeeding in public and this and that, and then we do COVID. When we did COVID, you had to know all the rules, and you'd be talking with health agencies every day and food banks, and so I took it really seriously. So we'd have the meeting to prepare the next day's show as soon as we come off air. And then I'd go home and I'd think about nothing else all day. I was obsessed with the show being good in a good way. I wanted it to be good, but it was too much really. And I was listening to podcasts constantly. I wouldn't miss a news program. I would send a tweet out to the listeners for a fun thing that we do. I'd be writing quiz. I couldn't watch a TV program with my wife without thinking that'll go in the show. Oh, there's a quiz question. Oh, that'll make trivia. Blah blah blah. So I was constantly making sure that it was a good show every day, and that was too much, really.
Takes its toll.
I finished, and my head was, I can think, I can read. I've got space inside my brain now to think about other things, so it was the right thing.
Yeah, and as a business owner, I can totally relate to that. Constantly, it never
obsessional.
stops.
Yeah.
Yes, which you don't. It does take its toll.
Yeah.
Even when you're taking time out on holiday, you're always thinking of the bigger picture.
Yeah.
How can we grow? How can we do that? Or worrying about problems.
Yeah.
So that, how does it feel to have that headspace? Because I just don't know.
It's great. I mean, I'm a business owner myself now, but I just don't employ anyone. I'm just me, so I don't have all those worries that you have. So it feels great. It's a lot better. I mean, there's still a period of adjustment. There's still a period of risk, and I've lost that security and that rhythm of going to the same place every day and doing the same thing. But it's great, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm loving the variety. And every week has different surprises in store.
Brilliant. And any negative feelings or emotions? Because sometimes if I do, this is a long time ago, pre-business, when I do have too much time to think, I overthink everything. Is there any of that occurring?
I'm not an overthinker. I do worry, always worry about money and with the kids and with the family. That's the basic stuff.
Yeah.
But other than that, I'm usually trying to compartmentalise. I'm quite good at doing that. Right, what's the next event? Let's get that ready. And try and box that one off. So that one's ready. I can think about the next one because I've got so many plates spinning. If I thought about them all at the same time, I'd go mad because I have a lot of plates spinning at the minute.
Oh, I bet you do.
Yeah,
and that is quite a skill, compartmentalising everything. And just on the subject of radio still, radio is still incredibly popular despite, even things like podcasts and video. Why do you think that is?
I think because it's live, and the more live it is, you can't replicate that in a podcast. Really, it's immediate and it's serving you in the moment. And so I would have people who'd come up to me and say, "I listen to you every day, never miss." And I always used to say, "What time do you listen?" And I would sometimes give them a shout out. But most people only listen for about 10 minutes. But you are built in to their day. So I'd say, well, what time do you listen? They'd say, oh, never miss. Between 10 to 8 and 8 o'clock, when I'm taking my dog for a walk, I put the headphones on and listen to you. That was their only 10 minutes, but they loved that 10 minutes. Or I put the kettle on, put you on, make a cup of tea, drink it, and then turn it off. Or the commute to work, which might be 20 or 40 minutes.
Yeah.
So it is that company. It's companionship.
Totally. Mm-hmm.
And that's where it's different to telly. You play to an audience of one, and people think you're talking directly to them, and you talk to one person and not the gang or the team. It's you at home are listening to me.
Yeah.
And that's when it becomes a very personal medium.
Definitely. And you've been a part of so many people's lives or mornings for so long.
Oh.
There must be people out there with withdrawal symptoms.
Oh, I get lots of very personal messages, and I stupidly left myself open on Facebook and just added anyone when I started the radio show, not thinking anything of it. So consequently, I can't put my children on there or my wife or anything. So it's basically the Facebook world is my old radio world. So I do get lots of, and I did a book reading for kids the other day in Newcastle City Library.
Oh,
just for little kids.
Lovely.
And one of the organisers said, there's a lady in a red coat over there who, she hasn't got any children. Is she allowed to come and watch you? And I said, absolutely. So she came over, and at the end she waited about nervously and came over and said, I miss you on the radio. Aww. And I just wanted to hear you. And it was really moving, and so I had a good chat with her. But that's the connection you can have with people, and that's the, it's very, very intimate.
It's really powerful stuff.
Yeah, I never took it for granted and still don't, because they're still interested in me.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I listened to some shows, and it was brilliant, very well put together. Like, you could tell that you really lived and breathed it. Yeah. But were there ever any embarrassing moments or where you were caught off guard?
Oh, all the time. I remember outside broadcasts were always fraught with danger, because you've got the public there, and you don't know what they're going to say. and you got your producer talking to you in one ear and somebody else on-field, on-site producer telling you another thing. So it's a blizzard of information for about 4 hours. And I remember being on the quayside one day, and there was a fella who was cleaning the quayside, and I said, so do you have any other sidelines, or is this your main job? He said, I'm a male stripper by night. And a male stripper, he said, oh, yeah, I love a bit of windmilling. And I went, windmilling, what's that? And the producer goes, no. And he went, you not know what? And then when the penny dropped, I couldn't get it back together. And we had a dead serious story to go to right straight after that. And my producer goes, get it together. There was somebody who died or something. And I was going, yeah, but I couldn't. And I just laughed for ages. And that became a trail and one of those bits that kept playing over and over again, but yeah, I just didn't see it. You know, it was just in plain. So thankfully, I never saw it. But
I was going to say, did he give you a demonstration?
No.
Oh, that's brilliant. But yeah, just going back to that kind of question I asked a little bit earlier about stand-up comedy, being on the radio, public speaking, introducing events. You know, that is sometimes some of people's biggest fear. It also ties into the windmilling, also being naked, being naked and public speaking. Why do you think, I'm not going to go there on the windmilling, but why do you think so many people are afraid to use their voice?
Well, it's like saying, why do people go bungee jumping? It's insane, it's stupid, it's mad, but I would never do that. And I look at that in exactly the same way. I think there are sometimes, just whatever your fear is, if you conquer it, it's an amazing feeling. And it is the same with all the things I've done. I didn't just walk into them and do them. I was terrified. And it's nerve-wracking. But once you overcome it, it feels great. And it's exhilarating. And it's brilliant. And it's the same as anyone who does any sort of adventurous pursuit. It's just mine is adventurous in, I would say, in a very tamer way. It's in front of a microphone or on a stage. It's just a different thrill.
Definitely. I bet more people would rather do a bungee jump than do stand-up comedy.
Well, I think so, yeah. I think people think it's going to be worse than it is, and it can be, but generally it isn't. But if you master it and if you prepare and if you get the right kind of guidance, I think it's okay.
Definitely. And I was very shy growing up. And this is perhaps one of the reasons why I do what I do now. I've kind of been soul searching for my purpose. And I think that's the conclusion I'm coming to, helping people use their voice, because it is painful when you can't. So what tips would you give to anyone thinking, you know, I want to do this, I want to present, I want to use my voice more, but I'm just a bit afraid?
Well, I think it's never been easier, because if you've got a mobile phone, you can do it. The gatekeepers have gone. You can have your own YouTube channel. You can have your own podcast. You can have your own show now. You don't have to get anything commissioned. It might not be as likely that it will be picked up, or you might not make money out of it, but anyone can do it now. And I think that's really exciting. And that's what's, I think, better about now. And that's a challenge for the mainstream broadcasters. And I think that this podcast revolution's brilliant. I love it. I can't get enough of them. I consume more podcasts now than I do television or radio.
Yeah, I think I do as well, which is interesting. Yeah. And you're so right. The barriers have been lowered, but it seems in another sense also the barriers have been raised in terms of anxiety levels. Yeah. People worried about what they say. You know, so much judgment these days, particularly online on social media. Yeah. So in one respect, some barriers have been brought down, and it's, I guess, getting people to overcome their fears and not worry so much about what people think and express their own opinions.
Yes, I would agree with that totally. I love it.
Yeah,
it's great.
Brilliant. And on the subject of TV, I'm sure you've been on TV many times in your career, but one of the more popular shows was Britain's Got Talent.
Yes, I did. I didn't want to do that because I'd never seen it. And again, it's funny, when I was a kid, there was a similar show, Opportunity Knocks.
Right.
And I watched that with my dad. And I watched it and thought, well, I'd never be able to be on that, but I'd love to. And I ended up being on it. A similar program. And what they do is they source a lot of the people from drama schools, or they troll the internet.
Right.
And they saw me and my pal doing our impressions on our YouTube channel. And they said, short notice, can you come down to the Dominion Theatre and you won't have to do any build up auditions. We'll put you straight in front of the judges live next Sunday. And I went, no. And my wife said yes. Well, she said, why are you out, rehearsing and doing this YouTube channel if you don't want to go anywhere? And I said, yeah, but if you get buzzed off and it's horrendous, that can just stick on YouTube. And my kids will have to grow up with that. And, it's just a horrible... I just don't like the thought of that. And then my then boss at the radio said, well, you do have a right to reply on the radio. So they're less likely to stitch you up and be brutal. So I said to me, mate, we need to do a set that we don't get buzzed off. So if we do an A to Z of impressions, and we did, because there's two of us, we did an Ant and Dec together.
Oh, amazing.
So I said, if we do an A to Z, starting with Ant and Dec, and Ant and Dec are there, we're off to a flying start. Mm-hmm. So I wrote this A to Z. We had to record it and send it to them so they knew what we were going to do. So we sent it to them and they went, we like that, but could you not do Ant and Dec?
I was thinking I didn't see Ant and Dec because I watched it.
So we couldn't do Ant and Dec. So I went, that really... And we were literally on the way down on the train practicing it. We'd never done it in front of an audience.
Yeah.
So we said, right, well, you can do Alan Carr. Do Alan Carr. He's quite popular. But even David Williams said to us, he said, when you said you were going to do an A to Z, I thought, this has to be good. Otherwise, you get to D and you get buzzed off because we know the premise. And if the premise stops working, you're off.
Yeah.
So it was a big risk.
Oh, it was amazing.
But it worked. But honestly, the whole day was... so many things happen behind the scenes that you wouldn't realise that we couldn't believe, It's fascinating.
Yeah, like I would have never imagined until you told me how almost rehearsed and staged it was. You think that these people have been queuing for hours.
Well, there is that chaos. So
so that as well.
We were getting near. You're getting near this. I know where the theatre is. I've been to it lots of times. So we're getting nearer and nearer. But you're seeing like 10 people with dogs, roller skaters. It's like the circus is coming to town. And you get in. It's just queues of people in leotards, people with accordions, and it is crazy. And there's two sittings. There's one afternoon show and then one evening show, and it's an absolute carousel when you go there. They go, you're in this queue. It's so well drilled, and then you go up here and you'll be interviewed with these people in the background, and then you'll go and sit over there and be interviewed there, and it's just non-stop all day, and then. They're leading you on, your adrenaline's up and down. And we were behind the curtain doing whispered interviews. And that drill buzzer is going off. And you're going, that could be us, And then they tapped me on the shoulder and went, you're on now. And I went, whoa. And so we jumped and turned round. And then that was just for a rehearsal. And then you go, and you stop panicking. And then... I was on the radio the next morning. This was on a Sunday. And I'm saying to me, mate, we're going to miss our train here. And they were going, you won't, you'll be fine. They just keep fobbing you off, and you've given them your phone and everything, so you can't get in touch with anyone. And I'm going, I'm going to definitely miss the train here. And then they went, we've bumped you now, you're on the evening show. I'm going, how are we going to get back? But they don't. They sort of seduce you into thinking it'll all be all right. We'll look after everything. And I'm going, well, they're going to get us back home somehow. I don't know how. So then we're on the evening show, and I was really worried because no one was getting buzzed off on the evening show. Right. And I was going, we need a buzzer. Otherwise, and then they went, you're on. And I went, right. So we went on and we had the judges stood for a standing ovation and it went crazy. And we came off and they went, will you phone your wife? So they gave me my phone, and I phoned her up, and she'd gone to bed, and I went, we've got through, and she's gone, oh great, she's whispering because the kids are in bed, and then she's going, and they went, could you do that again? She'd ask her to sound a bit more lively, and then they filmed us going up Tottenham Court Road, like sort of down and out, won the lottery and stuff. We were there till midnight now, and we can't get home. So I then phoned my radio boss, and he went, we'll book you a studio in London to do the breakfast show from, because we'll build this into the breakfast show.
Yeah.
So I had about 3 hours sleep and did the show on a cracked phone. in Wogan House.
Wow.
Just bizarre. Absolutely bizarre.
It's crazy, yeah. It's just almost like they don't care about your schedule.
Oh no,
as
they
long as...
absolutely got to fit in with theirs. They rearranged the train at hotel and everything was sorted.
Oh, they sorted it.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
so
They
that's
do
not so
all
bad.
that, and then the next morning they were driving us round. I think we were on. Oh no, it was the next week. We went on Piers Morgan and
cool.
Susanna Reid on GMTV, and then they'd drive you to another place in London and do online studio interviews with all these people. It's just a carousel.
Yes, an absolute PR
Yeah,
machine.
Yes, it's a monster. It's a
Wow.
monster. Yeah.
And how far did you get on the show?
This is the bit people don't know. That was it. So we did that, and they go, "You're going through," and Simon Cowell said, "Do you know what? I want you guys to do something bigger, do a song." So we went off and we rehearsed a thing, and they got us a gig with Ant and Dec, a private corporate thing in the Northeast. We did this. Every table was just people off the telly and footballers, and unbelievable. Just the wave that you can go on after it. It's strange, but unfortunately, I already had the job that you want to get at the end of it, sort of thing. So what happened was they then we went back down there and they said, you haven't got through. So we knew we hadn't got through when we went on Piers Morgan, but we weren't allowed to say it. Mm-hmm. But I was happy with that because you didn't see us fail. There's not us having a second gig that's worse than the first.
Yeah.
So that was great. So the one clip on YouTube, there's 3 million hits and rising, and it was the biggest impressions hit on there. And there were 2 other impressionists who got through. And the tabloids, there was like a online campaign to get us back. Well, we had nothing to do with that, so that was great. So it was on
lovely.
in the Sun and the tabloids, all these sort of going, bring back the Mimic Men, all this. So that worked in our favour. We never had to fail. We just didn't get it. You're told it all looks like you've gone on, but you didn't.
Oh, it's so interesting.
It's a lot of smoke and mirrors.
Hearing behind the scenes how it all works. You'll be breaking or ruining illusions for many people there.
There you go.
But it's the truth.
Well, some people have much worse stories, and people say, I flew back from Spain to do a singing bit, and I got through, but it wasn't even shown on telly. So to be honest, I thought when we got through, it was recorded, I said to me mate, don't get your hopes built up. I've heard of people who they don't get their bit shown on telly, even though they've got through.
Yeah.
So I was in a comedy club, in the Stand Comedy Club in Newcastle's underground, so your phone's off and everything. And I came out, my phone nearly exploded because it was a huge chunk of the episode was us, and it was bananas.
It was brilliant.
Crazy.
It was a brilliant performance, though. And actually, talking of that, one of my friends missed a wedding to go on it, and it was aired because it was a good story.
Wow.
Can't remember if it was the X Factor, maybe.
What was the singing?
Yes,
Brilliant.
singing. And so she got on. I think she was also a good singer, but also because of the story that she'd missed her wedding to come on. And she got through, but then she didn't. The next one, she was a little bit like, oh, I missed my wedding.
Yeah.
but
always on
never
the
mind.
YouTube clip.
Yeah, absolutely. And for that opportunity, because you never know where it's going to lead as well. And so you're clearly amazing at impressions. Which one do you think you do best?
Well, Simon Cowell said I do American impressions very well. So I've always done American actors and American presidents. So the one I was happiest with, because it took the longest to get right, was Barack Obama, because I hadn't seen many people do Barack Obama. And everybody had done George Bush, it's kind of not at ease reading the camera there. And Donald Trump, everybody does Donald Trump, but nobody did Obama. And then so I studied him and watched him on YouTube a lot and all these speeches. And he doesn't say much, and that's the key. So we need change. And it's, but that took ages to get to that. And it's just lots of studying and practicing.
Yeah, I guess like a lot of things,
Yeah.
But that's amazing. And very, very good impressions. So that's the end of the formal part of the interview, even though it's never that formal. But on to the regular 10 questions at the end. So you know how it works.
I do, yes.
Scale of 1 to 10, 1 the worst, 10 the best. How would you rank yourself at the following 10 things? Number 1, how good looking are you?
Oh, not good looking at all. I was always geeky. 1.
Oh, how funny are you?
Well, professionally for 25 years, 10. I have to say that, or people wouldn't book me.
Brilliant. Does your wife find you funny?
Not at all. Not in the slightest. My harshest critic.
It's always the way, isn't it? How good at cooking are you?
I do most of the cooking, but not very boring, very safe. 4.
Okay, what's your staple dish?
Spaghetti. Spaghetti bolognese, nice sauces.
Yeah.
I did mince and dumplings last night because it was cold.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, it's getting into that season,
Yes,
isn't it?
yes.
How good at singing are you?
Well, I sing sometimes, yes. Come and see me in Panto, and you'll hear me singing there. That's 8 out of 10.
Brilliant. Alcohol? Do you drink much alcohol?
Don't drink at all.
Oh, lovely,
stopped
yeah.
drinking about 20 years ago, so not very good at all. 0. But I used to be at 10.
Amazing. What would you say your parenting skills are like?
Oh, I love being a parent. Absolutely brilliant. I always fall short, but I do spend a lot more time with my kids, I'd say, than a lot of me fellow parent pals. So I would say 8.
Lovely. How good a friend are you?
To my close friends, I hope I'm really good and love listening to them. 8.
Are you intelligent, Alfie?
Well, going back to what we chatted about earlier, I would say we're all intelligent and we're all clever at something, but sometimes academia is put above everything else. So I'd say as clever as anyone, 10.
Totally agree. Kindness?
Yeah, I'm trying to be as kind as I can, 7.
And how good are you at sex?
Well, again, if you ask my wife, I'd give myself a 10. She'd say 1. So let's take an average and say 5.
Brilliant. Thank you for being an amazing
Brilliant.
guest.
Thank you.
Hi, it's Ryan from Harvey and Hugo, and I am the videographer here. So, are you looking for a new way to stand out in today's crowded digital landscape? Well, look no further than podcasting. Here at Harvey and Hugo, we specialise in creating and producing high quality podcasts that engage and inspire audiences. And with our comprehensive production services, we'll take care of all the technical details, from the recording and the editing to the distribution and the promotion. With millions of listeners tuning in every day, it's the perfect time to start connecting with them on a deeper level. Let Harvey and Hugo help you unlock the power of podcasting and take your message to the next level.